again? Okay, so part 2, content-based restriction on speech. What constitutes as content-based restriction? Government regulation of speech is content-based. If a law applies to a particular speech because of the topic discussed or the idea or message expressed, the lower courts have said, content speech. Content-based restrictions are considered a most serious infringement of freedom of speech. Twitter is still infringing on freedom of speech. So regardless of whether the government is involved in content-based or not, all social platforms are regulating and infringing on people's right to speak. Political speech is protected in the First Amendment. Any content is protected in the First Amendment. The only content that's not protected is that of a criminal nature. And right now our criminal laws are being usurped. We have a lawless government who thinks that it's above the law. So here's the definition. Content-based restrictions are considered a most serious infringement of First Amendment liberties, since the government is using the force of law to distort public discourse by suppressing, through either prior restraint or subsequent punishment, those messages perceived by the government to be somehow objectionable. Always begin with a presumption that a content-based restriction on speech is suspect. The strength of the presumption and scrutiny may diminish, however, if the type of expression at issue falls into a less protected category of speech, or the court may avoid the strict scrutiny triggered by a seemingly content-based restriction by interpreting a statutory language in a manner that eliminates the content-based issue. So over here in 1998, National Endowment of Arts and Finley, a case construing a merely advisory and not regulatory a statutory directive to the National Endowment for Arts to consider general standard of decency in awarding grants. Restrictions on speech may qualify as content-based in a number of different ways. One involves restrictions aimed at particular subjects or topics, since city ordinances that regulate signs based on the type of information the signs convey. A second type of content-based regulation involves restriction aimed at specific viewpoints, laws prohibiting the criticism of the war effort or ban the teaching of evolution. So in schools, you cannot ban creationism and you cannot ban evolution. If you're going to teach one, you gotta teach the other. Right now, we are banning creationism and they're teaching evolution. Another type of content regulation involves restrictions resulting from the speaker's identity. A law barring labor organizers or religious groups from using a public auditorium. A public school, if a religious group wants to use a public school, that's a public place. And they cannot ban the religious group from using the public place. This list is not exclusive. Content-based restrictions can take other forms as well. Federal statutes that prohibit false claims of having been awarded military decorations imposes a content-based restriction. Content-based restrictions are those that depend on what the speaker says. This right here on YouTube and any YouTube is content-based, and YouTube may not prohibit the content. Corporations have no right to prohibit another person's content from being allowed in the public. This is a public square, and thus, as a public square, it needs to be allowed. Facebook cannot prohibit political or content-based speech. Nextdoor cannot prohibit political speech, especially not of those of the candidate, because the whole idea behind speech is to allow robust debate. It may be difficult to decide what type of content-based restriction is involved in a particular case. For example, is a law that outlaws the showing of indecent films a subject or topic restriction, or does it entail a viewpoint restriction on the theory that it seeks to restrict the expression of certain attitudes towards sex? As we will see later, it's sometimes necessary to decide what type of content-based restriction is involved. For viewpoint restrictions in certain circumstances are treated more severely by the court than other types of content restrictions. A law that would otherwise appear to be content-based in any of the sense we have just described may nonetheless be treated by the court as being content neutral if the government can show that the law was aimed at the secondary effects of the speech. No law can restrict free speech. It is clear, if you read the Founding Fathers' arguments on free speech, you will realize that part of this is bullshit. Clearly, the Founding Fathers believed in people's ability to speak, regardless of the content, regardless of the thought. Your thoughts are your own, and they're protected in the First Amendment rights. No person can infringe upon you. They cannot say that you cannot say your speech because your speech is awful. Who are they to say that? No corporation can tell you not to say a certain thing. That's a violation of your right. No government can tell you what you cannot say or what you cannot do. Like I said before, our constitutional rights have been eroded and they are being ignored. It has taken 100 years for us to get to this point to where people's rights are being chipped away. And this is one area that the government is infringing on both the religious freedom and the free speech. Religious freedom, you are free from government imposition. The government may not tell you what to believe or what to have an opinion on or what ideas you need to pursue. You are free to worship however you want. The ultimate guide is God. He governs your behavior. But you have the freedom. God gives you the freedom to eat what you want, take what you want, dress the way you want. Those masks are a complete violation of your free speech. And behave the way you want. In the end, He will judge you on what you eat, what you dress like, and how you behave. And the Bible is clear. We used to adhere to the Bible. And that was our common ethical standard. All Christians believed in the same standard. And we agreed to the standards in the Bible. And if you come to this country and you want to be an American citizen, you must agree to our Constitution. If you do not agree with our Constitution and you hold another country of higher value, then you're not an American citizen. And that concludes my free speech rant. Anyways, comment below and let's have a robust debate. But Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Nextdoor, they cannot violate your speech, and you do have a cause of action if they censor your speech. No politician is allowed to block you. They need to hear from you. You need to be represented. Every politician represents people. They don't represent groups. There are ways that groups work with people to advance the individual rights. But if a group becomes so corrupt and so egregious, it needs to be defunded.